Ours later.
We want to welcome you to our City Commission study session. We ask that you turn off or silence all cell phones. Meetings are televised every day on Channel 2 at 7 p.m. and at midnight. First item on the agenda, quarterly report from Leavenworth Unified School District, number 453.
Mayor and Commission, we have Dr. Mike Groth, the superintendent, here with us tonight.
Hi, Dr. Roth. Good evening. How are you doing? Thank you for this opportunity once again. I come with handouts. This is our newest quarterly Pride magazine. And then here is a copy of next year's academic calendar. So, on the bond, Mother Nature has not been kind to us. We're about 68 days behind schedule. With that, I kind of share with the commission that there will be no transitions next year with any of our buildings. So all of our 4 neighborhood schools will remain intact. There won't be a transition for Lawson or any of the 5th grade. What our plan is, we just had a meeting with the construction company today. It looks like it'll probably be the end of February when we get occupancy. So our hope is to maybe do a soft opening with 6th grade students right after spring break, if that timing works out. That way they can get acclimated to not that they'll be there the following year, but they can kind of help us work out if there's any kinks or anything like that in transitions and food service and that type of thing. It'll give us an opportunity on a smaller scale to work that out. And so anyway, our plan now is to transition with that. The high school is planning on getting the new security building or the new security entryway, that beginning as soon as school's out. We're working on the lighting, updating our lighting and parking lot. Those of you that travel to the high school quite a bit, you know you could bottom out your car or rip off a muffler coming out. We're working on part of that to fix that. And then new lighting for security to do new LED lights, which should help with visibility for evening events and students walking to and from cars. So and it'll also help us with our camera coverage with the additional lighting out there. And so that will be part of the bond process. And then they will also, I know that John's done a nice job covering the our issue with our high school ROTC science wing, the floor. We had actually where they had went in and put new like gas lines and water lines on the last construction. That piece evidently settled somehow and it's kind of broke, so our floor is off keel. We will also get that fixed over the summer, so we'll have a lot going on at the high school this summer. So it would be the new intermediate center and the high school will be all in construction over the summer. Our hope is to make sure that the parking lot and the lighting is done before school starts, and the entryway probably won't be done until sometime end of September, 1st of October, so we'll reroute some of our students' entry points until that's complete, and so we're working on that. We also, within all this process, we hired a firm to come in and do a boundary study to help us make sure when we redesign our 3 elementary schools that we're doing it for futuristic type capacity issues. So the board will hear that presentation in May at the May board meeting, and they'll finalize either in the May or June board meeting, they'll finalize the boundaries of our 3 elementary buildings once the new pre-K and K center is up and going. Actually, as we transition, that new boundary will fall in, and we'll work with parents and advertising or sharing that information as soon as it becomes official. One of the things that I know that the commission has asked me before is transportation with the new boundaries, with the new, we should most We will be providing more transportation to kids. We'll look at some safety points where they have to cross streets. Part of that study that will be presented to the board in May will also have some ideas on increasing some transportation. And so I think we'll be able to solve a need and a want with the additional transportation. Going back to Mother Nature, we've had several snow days or cold days where we've released school or not had school or held school for students. Some of those days we brought teachers in. With that, we're in position now where we're not having to make up any additional time or add minutes to the day. And so barring any other major reason to shut school down, we should be good on time. With Mother Nature, it also, all of our spring sports seasons, it's really been an indoor season, which we haven't had the kids haven't had an opportunity to really practice outside much, and so the coaches have done a nice job. The students have done a nice job kind of working through all of the kinks in those schedules. April 3rd, which is just a couple weeks away, the Leavenworth Education Foundation is hosting their breakfast. That's at 7 a.m. At the high school. So look forward to that. They always do a great job with that event, and it's really a celebration of all the good things that they do for our students in our community. Kindergarten roundup for all 4 elementary schools will be Thursday, April 11th from 5:30 to 6:30. It's an opportunity for families to come in and register students, get the necessary paperwork, give a chance to kids that may not have been in the buildings to come into the building. So that's always a neat event that our principals do a nice job with. Graduation, which is hard to believe we're already talking about, but that will be May 18th at Pioneer Stadium at 10 a.m. The last day of school is the 23rd. And with that, I will open the floor to you if you have any questions of me.
Quick question. How far do you have to live from the school in order to qualify for bus service?
So currently, the law states that, and it's based on funding, and it's at 2.5 miles. I know that the legislation has been working, and there's been a lot of discussion to maybe staircase that back, but they haven't done so yet. But for reimbursement purposes, currently it's 2.5 miles. We do offer transportation for the Woodland Village area and also the Shenandoah area based on traffic patterns, and we felt like those were 2 safety kind of pockets. We did the Shenandoah before the sidewalks were put in because at that time there were no sidewalks to be able to walk to school. So in the new, when we redesign everything, that possibly could change based on some because of that, or it may stay and expands in other areas as well, but it's at 2.5 miles.
And just a quick point, I remember when I was on the school board, that 2.5 miles is pretty strict. In fact, one person could live right here, the next door neighbor, one could qualify, and literally the next door neighbor would not qualify
Right, so-
for the free busing because they do the
That
GPS
is-
or GIS or.
Right, that's correct, and it's from their closest attendance center. So like when we changed the attendance center, like more Lawson students would actually probably qualify because they could fall beyond that 2.5 miles. All of our 5th grade from this corner up here would qualify because it would be further than the 2.5 miles to the intermediate center. And when we get audited on that, an auditor will randomly choose people that are close in proximity, and they'll actually drive it. And if it doesn't meet their then we lose that kid. If it does, we keep it on the, when we say we lose that kid for funding. And that's how they audit it. They'll actually pick out a handful and they'll drive it from door to door.
I have a question. All the preschools that are going to be, the preschool kids that are going to be at Lawson, where are do all the elementary schools have preschools in them now?
No, not all of our elementaries do. Henry does not, because we don't have the capacity at Henry. And so the Henry students were split up between David Brewer and Lawson. And we provided spaces for that, but not all of the spaces were used. But not all the buildings have it at this time.
Have you heard comments from parents about consolidating that into one school?
You know, everything that I've heard when we've had some people come and spoke to me, and we've discussed it, and when they see the opportunities at that school, the concerns have kind of subsided. But right now, I'm hearing more positive about the concept and the opportunity than the location or the consolidation.
Okay, good.
I have a question in terms of the population for preschool and kindergarten. Is it staying steady? Is it on the rise? Is it declining?
And the board will hear this on May 1st, which they've heard it in some briefings. Our study has shown that our student population will probably stay within 1% for the next 8 to 10 years. And so 1% up, 1% down, and it'll vary year to year. Our kindergarten population, according to what we're seeing, is staying about the same. The availability of housing within the Leavenworth district and the city of Leavenworth are different now. And so that's kind of a point that we don't know where those students will actually come in, or if they'll go to Lansing with the new housing development. But they do all the new rooftops. This study counts all the new rooftops and what the projections of those family makeups would be, or traditionally what that would be. And then they come back and give us that demographic as a comparison.
One of those housing developments is out by the intersection of 20th Street and Eisenhower. That's in the Lansing School District.
It's the city of Leavenworth.
City of Leavenworth, Lansing School. Is there any possibility that those school-age children would come to Leavenworth or be in the Leavenworth district?
We are in what we consider an open district, right? We haven't been a real open, we've been closed to the building of Henry because of capacity issues.
Right.
With the redesign and the new intermediate center, we will be in position to accept new students moving forward. Why that's important for us is that our district is pretty landlocked, and we're a very small district in comparison of square miles. And so the only way that a school can really generate dollars is by having a higher student count. And so that's why we're at open, because we're bordered so tightly that there isn't a lot of potential growth for new housing developments within the city of Leavenworth. And so our hope is, and my belief is that with the quality of programming that we currently have and the addition of the concepts that we're working towards, parents are going to want to bring their kids here, because it's not only a great place to be educated now, it's even going to be greater once we get all of the realignment and really get that foundation for kids moving in the right direction.
Thank you for that answer. One other question on the junior ROTC/science wing. Will the district be able to get any relief from insurance or?
No, because there was through all, and I mean, from October to really the middle of January, we've had architects, engineers, geotechs, we've had multiple layers come in and look. There's nothing that was proven to be broken.
Right.
So like there wasn't a water line that broke, or we couldn't find any of that. It was just literally bad luck. And so it would be a cost. And the paper reported it correctly. It's about a $500,000 project, but it's not a $500,000 floor, right? And so I had a patron say, "What am I doing, putting diamonds in?" No. When you talk about the man hours that it's going to take to break that floor out, take it out, redo walls, redo ceilings, put the cement in, let
Oh,
it
yeah.
cure, come back in, put the walls back in. It's very labor intensive. The expense is in the labor, not the floor.
When will the repairs take place?
Over the summer. Those begin, matter of fact, teachers and stuff will start moving out before Memorial Day, and we'll start demolition as soon as Memorial Day's over.
Do you think they'll be done by the time school starts, or?
Well, since it shouldn't be determined by the weather, they've said that it should be done, that it will be done by August 1.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Ross.
Next item on the agenda, presentation of wastewater rate study.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, in 2016 budget session that summer, one of the first things I brought to the commission was the need to do a wastewater rate study. It had been about 25 years since the city had done a full wastewater rate study. And the commission agreed, and in 2017, funding was put in. We put out a request for a proposal. We selected Black & Veitch, who's a regional expert in this field and has worked with the city on numerous projects. I'm going to turn it over to Black & Veitch in a minute. One of the things I want to focus on is, and Anna will go through in much more detail, is that it's not just a rate study, but it's creating long-term plans, a 5-year financial plan, and a full analysis of the city of Leavenworth's wastewater program, including revenues, expenses, activities, reserves, future requirements, an expert, independent third party to come in, assess what we do and what we have, and present a report to us. So that's what you'll hear tonight.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I appreciate you taking some time to take a look at wastewater tonight. The agenda that I have set forth is talking a little bit about Black & Veitch and the team that has been working on this important project, the methodology and the project approach that we've applied, how we've applied it here in the city of Leavenworth for financial resiliency, and then what the path forward looks like for the utility. So a little bit about the Black & Veitch team. So Black & Veitch, we're a global engineering, construction, and consulting firm. We are headquartered here in Overland Park, Kansas. We have about 11,000 employees worldwide. About 2,500 are in Kansas City. The Black & Veitch Management Consulting is the consulting arm of Black & Veitch. We have over 200 consultants that mainly do financial, operational, and technical consulting services. We provide management and financial services to 25 of the top 50 largest metropolitan service areas in the United States. So we bring not just a local perspective, but a national perspective as well to the city. We also shape the water industry through our thought leadership. Many of the consultants in our group are recognized by the regulatory agencies in helping communities that are currently under consent decrees negotiate with the EPA regarding affordability issues, communities that are working with the bond rating agencies for revenue bonds. We provide assistance by providing feasibility studies for both the engineering and financial support of those bonds. And then many of us are also members of committees, as well as editors of some of the key manuals that are used for the industry. So the American Water Works Association, that's the AWWA, have a manual. It's called the M1 manual that sets forth how to do water rates. I'm a member of the Rates and Charges Committee for AWWA, and that is the committee that actually writes that manual. The Water Environment Federation, that's kind of the wastewater side, also has a manual of practice 27 that sets forth how to do wastewater rates. They just issued the newest manual last year. I was the co-author on one of the chapters in the new manual for wastewater. And then WEF, the Water Environment Federation, also just recently issued in the last couple of years a manual for stormwater as well. So those are the three manuals that we use to guide us as we go through this process. Black & Veitch also publishes a couple different surveys. One is the 50 largest survey. This is a survey of the 50 largest metropolitan service areas in the United States. It's basically a comparison of water and wastewater rates for those 50 largest communities. We also do a stormwater survey, a national stormwater survey every 2 years. We have about 75 utilities that participate in that. We ask about 75 or 80 different questions, so it's very thorough. We do that every other year. I've been leading that survey for about the last 12 years or so. So the team that we have put together, it's made up of not only folks from the consulting side, but it's from the engineering side as well. So we have Derek Cambridge and John Keller. Those are the two engineers on the team. They both have over 20 years of experience dealing with wastewater treatment systems. They both work within the Kansas City area, working for Johnson County Wastewater, City of Lawrence, Unified Government in Kansas City. John Keller was also the project manager on the UV disinfectant project that was done at the wastewater treatment plant here. He was also the project manager for the last wastewater master plan, so he brings local experience for the city of Leavenworth. I've been with Black & Veitch for over 20 years. I specialize in water, wastewater, stormwater rate studies. I've worked in a lot of communities in the Kansas City area. Lawrence and Topeka, Johnson County, the city of Olathe, Unified Government, Kansas City, Board of Public Utilities, KCMO, Blue Springs. I work in Oklahoma and Nebraska, and then I also work on the southeast, and in the East Coast as well. So again, I have the local experience, and I also have the national perspective. And you'll see that a lot of the team members on our team, they'll have local perspective where they live, but they also bring in that national perspective as well. So the methodology and the approach that we've taken here, it's really based on kind of 4 key points. The first one is making sure that we look at the system holistically and put together an integrated plan that takes into account all of the different competing needs of the system. So we have operating needs, capital needs, we have the needs of the customers to have a rate that's affordable. We have a need of the governing body to know that they're doing the right thing for the utility, a need for the financial parties involved for issuing bonds to make sure that we are meeting the metrics that need to be met in order to issue those bonds. So we need to look at the objectives of all of the different parties and make sure that we're meeting those objectives. Through the use of rigorous analytics, we develop the best practice policies for the utility and defensible rates. So, it's not just designing a rate structure that's going to recover the amount of revenue that's necessary for the utility. It needs to be defensible. So if there is an issue where a rate goes to court, if there's a lawsuit filed, it is defensible and we can support our work in the court of law. We use robust modeling that's data-driven, and again, it's also based on defensible principles. So it's a process that we use over and over and over again with every client that we use, so we get consistent and defensible results. And then finally, customer engagement. This isn't just we're focusing on the external customers, but the internal customers as well. So making sure that we're meeting the needs of not just the utility, but the community, that we are providing information and that information is coming back to us and we're listening to it. So for every study that we do, we use the same methodology. It's this phased and structured sequencing of tasks. So there's basically 3 key tasks that we perform, and under each one of those, there's a sequence of subtasks that gets us through the process. And so as I mentioned, we do this, every study that we do it the same way so that the results are consistent and defensible. Okay. So applying this approach here within the city, what we wanted to do was to put together a plan that's going to put the sewer utility on the path to financial resilience. So when we do that, we want to look at where we are now, where the utility is now, and where we want to be at some point in the future. So we were hired in December of 17. We completed the draft report last summer. So at that point in time, so we were working with the 2018 budget. So we had put together a plan that showed that at the end of 2018, the sewer fund would have about 3 days of operating cash on hand. So basically, 3 days of operation and maintenance expenses is what we were projecting at that time. So that was kind of our starting point, is basically, you know, there's really not a very big emergency fund for the sewer fund. There's also, what we were projecting is no available cash for capital projects. So when we were looking at what 2019 looked like at that point, it looked like there was no capital projects were going to be able to be financed. So that's our starting point. So then the question is, well, where do we want to be? So obviously, we want to have enough funding for O&M. We want to make sure that we're not deferring any maintenance of the system. That needs to be done. We want to make sure that we're funding those capital requirements. They're in the capital improvement plan for a reason. They need to be done, so we need to make sure that we have the funding for them. And then the third thing is we need an operating reserve that we can count on to be there when we need it. So we made a target of achieving a 30-day operating reserve by the end of the study period. So this was the path that we set out for. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the specifics of how we achieved this. So the building blocks associated with doing a rate study, starting at the bottom, the very first thing that we do is a financial plan. So this is taking a look at how much revenue the utility is currently generating from the existing fees and how much revenue the utility needs to generate. We'll look at what the difference is between the two, and that's a gap that we have to close. So once we figured out how much revenue we need, the next step is determining how do we recover those costs from each customer class. So from which customer class should pay which cost. So this is where we're really looking at how each customer uses the system. So when you look at a utility, customers use the utility in different ways. So for wastewater, there's a difference between how residential customers use the system and industrial customers use the system. Residential customers contribute flow and strength to the system, that's domestic strength, while industrial customers contribute flow and strength that's much higher. And so there's certain parts of the system that are there just to treat that industrial flow. So we want to recognize those differences in the customers and make sure that we're allocating costs based on how each customer type uses the system. So that's really the cost of service allocation step of doing a rate study. So once we know how much revenue we need, we know kind of from whom we need to generate it, it's then designing the rate structure that will do that, while at the same time we'll try to mitigate the impact on the customers as much as possible. So those are the three major steps. What we're going to kind of really focus on tonight is really just the financial plan that we've put together. So a financial plan involves 3 key steps. The first one is looking at doing a review of all the revenue. So this is revenue that's not only generated from the rates, but miscellaneous revenue as well. We then need to develop the revenue requirements. So we have, as I mentioned, we have operation and maintenance expense. We have debt service that's on existing GO bonds as well as any proposed GO bonds that would be issued to help fund some of the capital projects. Capital outlay, that's cash financing of equipment and vehicles. Cash financing of capital, so any of that major capital, maybe we're going to finance it through both debt and cash. And then funding the emergency reserve. So we identified those 2 pieces, and then as I mentioned, that gap between the 2 is the revenue increase that's needed in order to bring the revenue up to the level of our revenue requirements. So once we put that plan together, that's how the utility is going to become self-sufficient, is by setting the rates so that it can recover the amount of revenue necessary to fund all of the costs. So our plan is designed to achieve these key performance metrics. First one, of course, is to fund all of the operation and maintenance expense. We also want to fund 100% of the capital program. We want to mitigate the customer, the impact on the customer as much as we can. And then the last one is the operating reserve. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about the operating reserve and the importance of having that fund. This fund is really, it's an emergency operating reserve to be there in the case of fluctuations in revenue, operating emergencies, natural disasters, any kind of economic issues that come up. You know, it's the savings, really the savings account for the utility. So when we look at how much a utility should be setting aside, there's a couple different guidelines that we look at. The Water Environment Federation in the Manual of Practice identifies 1 to 3 months of operating expenses. The Government Financial Officers Association, that's the GFOA, they recommend 45 days. The American Water Works Association does a benchmarking survey every couple of years. Over 600 utilities, I think, participate in it, water and wastewater. The average of those utilities that participate have between 2 months and 12 months in the reserve. So you can see it kind of ranges, you know, from a month or two up to a full year. There's a couple factors that you want to keep in mind when determining how much you should have in that emergency reserve. One is that rating agencies look at this when they're determining the rating, which then of course leads to the interest rate for revenue bonds if you're going to the market. The city of Leavenworth uses general obligation bonds. When you issue general obligation bonds, they don't typically look at the reserves of a utility, so that's not really a factor here. The second thing to take into consideration is that wastewater bills based on the average winter quarter, which means that the revenue for wastewater is fairly stable. So it's not really subject to the volatility that a water utility sees by having either, you know, dealing with conservation or having a really wet summer. That's not an issue for wastewater. So for those two reasons, we had set a target of having an operating reserve of 30 days. Okay. So this is what the financial plan looks like when we put numbers to it. So you can see this is going from 2019 to 2026. Operation and maintenance expense is around $3 million to start, goes up to $4 million by the end of the study period. The debt service that we're showing there, that's the debt service on existing debt that was used to fund capital that's already been put in place. Capital outlay, that's the cash financing for vehicles and equipment. What you can see there in 2019, the budget would have been $500,000. We've had to reduce that down to 125 because there's just not funding for the full 500,000. Cash financing of capital, as you can see in 2019 and 2020, zero. Based on what we were looking at, the numbers we were looking at last summer, we had projected that there would not be any available cash to fund capital projects in 2019 and 2020. So the total revenue requirements start at about $4 million and grow to a little over $6 million by the end of the study period. What I'm showing there on the next line is the deferred capital, deferred CIP. So the first 2 years, we're deferring all of the projects that were in the capital budget. And then you can see over time, starting in 2022, we start then funding those projects back. So over the 8-year period, all of the projects that were identified in the capital program are funded. We just have to defer some of them at the beginning until we can get a rate increase put in
Where are you
place.
referring to? And I'm trying to, because I can't see that very well. Where are you referring to in the
I don't
booklet?
think that the actual table is in the report.
I've got everything else here, but I don't see it. Okay, all right.
I
I'll just
apologize.
listen.
I put together some new tables just specifically for this presentation, so I apologize. It's not in the.
Yeah, I know, it's hard to see.
I wonder if we cut one bank of lights, would that look better? I'm having a hard time, are you having a hard time? The contrast,
I can't see it.
yeah, that's the, makes it a little bit better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that'll
that's
help.
better.
Yeah, thank you.
On these next two lines right here, this is the emergency reserve balance and the number of days. So we were projecting that 2019 would start with 3 days of cash on hand. Because of the reduction in the capital outlay and no cash financing of the capital, we projected it would end at about 17 days. Going forward then, as you can see, we are building that up to the 30 days. And these are the revenue adjustments that are necessary in order to do that. So 13.5% for 2020, 2021, 2022. You can see that gets us to 18 days, but also what it does, though, is it gets to the point where we're now funding all of the capital that was in the program for that year and starting now to fund the capital that was deferred. So then going forward, those increases give us the revenue that we need to get up to the 30-day operating reserve and to fund all of that deferred capital. So again, at the end of the study period, all of the capital that was in the plan is funded. Another goal for the city was to increase spending on I&I reduction programs. So I&I, that's infiltration and inflow of water that gets into the system. Obviously, that water goes to the treatment plant, and so there's costs associated with treating that water, even though it's technically it's non-billable flow. So to the extent that we can reduce the amount of I&I that gets into the system, we can reduce the costs. So what we're showing as by 2026, once some time has passed and we've been able to generate some revenue from the revenue increases, fund the capital program, we then have some funding available to start investing about $250,000 a year in expanding the I&I program. One of the things that I also wanted to mention is, one of the things that we looked at when we did the study was the minimum bill that's charged to new customers. So the wastewater flow is based on the average winter quarter, January, February, of water usage. So a new customer that moves to the city in April, they haven't established their average winter quarter, so they're automatically billed for 7 units or 100 cubic feet until they've lived here long enough to establish that average winter quarter. So we looked at water usage in February of 2014 and February of 2017, and what that showed was actually average water usage per account was about 4.9 CCF in 2014 and about 4.5 in 2017. So we've recommended that that minimum be lowered from 7 down to 5 CCF. And reflected in these numbers is the decrease in revenue that would result of lowering that minimum that is built into these numbers. Okay. So the plan that we've put together, it's really a balancing act to make everything work. So it involves deferring capital for the first couple of years, reducing capital outlay in the first year, achieving the 30 days of O&M by year 6, and then maintaining it from that point forward, and also maintaining a consistent level of annual revenue adjustments. So, what you'll notice, what we're proposing here is a series of 3 increases, and we recognize that they're not small increases. They are double-digit increases, but we've broken it out in the 3 years and made it work by deferring costs while we phase in the level of revenue that we need to really fund all of the requirements for the system. So that is what our plan was based on. So the path forward then, following this plan is, again, starting this year with 3 days of O&M, or 3 days in the operating reserve, and no funding for capital. In 5 years, we could hit that 30-day reserve mark, and we could be reinvesting in the system, funding that deferred capital. By the end of the study period, all of that capital will be funded, will meet the 30-day reserve, and will be able to invest in the system.
What's the possibility of stretching this 3 years out to 4 or 5? To reduce the...
Well, what that's going to do is just, we'd have to defer costs more, defer the CIP a little bit further, maybe cut back on some more of the capital outlay in order to make that work.
Well, what was our 3-day total at the end of the year, off of our current year of 18?
What was your question?
Reserve, 3 days.
What was the reserve?
Reserve.
So, I'm trying to
3 days,
think what that would, I'm
Wasn't
sorry.
3 days?
Yeah, are you talking about the dollar amount?
Actual dollar. Actual dollars.
Dollars, not 3 days.
Yeah. I'm going to say that's probably somewhere around $20,000.
And this would generate how much?
30 days. 30 days worth. So the reserve would grow to about $350,000.
Yeah, for the term,
Right.
but for the 3 days.
The 3 days, I think, was probably about $20,000, is what 3 days of O&M would equate to.
How much is the percentage of increase on the individual's bills being proposed through this?
Do you want to talk about the differences that, so it's the 13% overall, but how does that affect residential, industrial, or how does that affect the different classes?
So the plan that we have put together in the report, this was based on,
Page 29 or 25? I got a chart on page 29.
right, so there's a difference between what I showed you tonight and the plan that's in here. This report was based on a revenue increase in 2019 that did not happen. So that's why the numbers that we were looking at tonight were a little bit different. So to determine what the proposed revenue adjustments that we showed tonight, which was phasing that in over the 3-year period, we would have to go back and develop the rates based on that plan.
I think that's very important for what we need to know
Right,
here
right.
before we even think about moving on this.
Well, I think we need to, I'm sure we're gonna have to take it up as far as our budget deliberations coming up for 2020, but
Right.
it's obvious after reading the report, that, very comprehensive report, that, it's 2019, and you were recommending some increases that we didn't include for a number of reasons, but, it's a significant requirement, and we're at 3 days reserves right now in O&M. That is a little risky, right? If we were to have a natural disaster or other situation befall us where we would have to spend more than $20,000. I did have a question in terms of we have 3 big industrial customers in terms of Fort Leavenworth, the penitentiary, and the VA. So they're on long-term contracts?
Correct.
How long are those contracts?
Well, they review them every year, but I want to say
Is it, are they renewed? We look at them.
5 years, I believe.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I don't want to get too bogged down in it, but I just wondered whether how that figures into all this. Does it figure into, in terms of establishing a new rate table and things like that? Or are those entities paying their fair share? I assume that they are, but there wasn't, you mentioned it, but there wasn't much in terms of what those contracts have written into them, and those are pretty big customers, so.
Right. So those contracts are very specific in terms of what costs can be allocated to those customers and how the charges are developed
Sure,
and defined. And so
Yes.
we of course, calculated the rates based on, specifically on their contracts and what could be included in the rates. So.
And you think those contracts are pretty much within the ballpark of what you've seen in your others? I don't know, we're kind of unique in having 3 big customers like that for basically federal entities.
Right.
So.
Right. We didn't notice anything specific that should be called out, no.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I just, some of the social economic characteristics or demographics, I think, and you didn't get into those tonight, we don't have time probably, but I did find them very interesting and obviously impact on, should impact and we'll have to take into consideration with respect to, any rate increase, any change in the rates. But one of them I found pretty interesting was from 2010 to 2016, the number of Leavenworth residents aged 60 years and older increased by approximately 15.6% compared to an increase in the general population of 2.2%. So that's, I hope that doesn't continue. I mean,
That's baby boomers, Mike.
well, I know, but I mean, it does have economic consequences in terms of, you know,
Well, it
first of
continues
all,
so
where,
long,
even
it'll
with the
start
rate
going back
increases,
down.
where the rate increases are gonna be coming from, and just, like, that's not the purpose of tonight, but, I think as we go forward with the comprehensive plan for 2020, key characteristics, social economic characteristics and demographics, you know, we're gonna have to take a look at that. I mean, would be a real I think a real
Well,
challenge.
especially with our senior rebate
Right.
program.
So,
That would make a difference on that.
That's
And
why
I think that's mentioned in here a little bit too.
We contracted with Black Veitch to do this study. And that's the end of Black and Veitch's involvement, is doing this study. So it's not like you're selling this so that you've got some more money coming on the other end. You've done your job. But you're also telling us we've got a major problem. I don't want to underplay it. 3-day reserve, $20,000. How much do 20 lights cost in wastewater treatment?
About that.
Yeah, I mean, these lights are $700 each, aren't they? And I don't know how many we have. How many do we have, Mr. Staples?
2,000.
How many of those lights do we have? You know,
Probably 50.
50 of them, and so there's $35,000 of the lights, if, you know.
ones.
UV lights is 1,440 of them.
For ads,
187 feet.
okay, yeah, I mean, 20,000 is absolutely nothing. And we cannot kick the can down the road. You know, the can was kicked down the road 25 years
25
ago
years, yeah.
on stormwater, and, you know, we got hit with it last year, we had to implement. And I don't know if it costs more because we waited 25 years to do it, but more than likely it did. But this is something too that we cannot kick down the road. This is serious. 3 days of reserve on our wastewater treatment is terrible for an established city.
I'm kind of shocked at that too,
Yeah,
3
and
days.
that's,
Even
this is something we have to deal with
non-profits,
very,
right?
very quickly. And to get up to, and, you know, you're recommending 30 days. Everyone else recommended a minimum of 45, sometimes up to a year. I mean, if we wanted a year reserve, it'd be impossible unless we played it out over 50 years. But getting up to an acceptable level of reserve, 30 days reserve, $250,000, there's gonna be some, it's gonna take some political will of this commission to get it done, but I think it has to be done.
And I think the proper place to do it is coming up with this 2020 budget development, analysis, discussion. But I don't know what other vehicle would we have to deal with it?
I think the most important distinction, another important distinction I should say, is that wastewater needs to be looked at the same way that the gas company or the power company or the phone company, it's a standalone utility. It is not supported by city funds, it's not supported by general fund dollars. Or stormwater, if something broke, we would be able to bond on the full faith and credit of the city or take it from somewhere else. Stormwater, or wastewater essentially acts as a separate business. It is rate funded, solely rate funded.
Right.
So when the Black and Veitch team was reviewing it, it's the plant, the collection system as a business. If it were to be run as a business, what is the best practice to run this as a privatized utility, essentially? I mean, is that essentially correct? And it shouldn't be looked at necessarily as, you know, another city operation. It is a standalone operation.
So are you suggesting we don't address it as part of the budget?
No, absolutely, we have to, because it's run by the city, but in all other aspects, it's run as a standalone utility.
If we had addressed this, just like in the budget, which is, you know, midsummer, and it doesn't go into effect January next year, are we walking on thin ice? I mean, do we have to, is it your recommendation, Black Veitch's recommendation, that this be addressed sooner than going into effect next January?
Well, you know, the numbers that I showed tonight assumed that the rate increase would go in January of 2020.
Okay. That's,
You know, the 3 days of O&M, that was our estimate based on, you know, the 17 budgets and what was in for 18 budgets. And So my hope is that, the utility ended up better than that at the end of 18, I don't know. So maybe there was more funds on hand at that time, and it's not as bad as it seems right now. So that'll give us time to at least take a look at this and come up with the rates that would go in January 1 of 2020.
Can I mention another thing with respect to rates, and you mentioned it a couple times in the report, in terms of recommending the city work with Leavenworth Water Works to develop annual reports that will provide the city with the data necessary to update the rates on a routine basis. Data that should be readily available to the city should include some components. Could you just very briefly describe those components?
Yeah, so the rate structure that the city has, you have the user charge, which is the flat fee that everybody pays. And then you have the volume charge, which is declining block. So the more billable wastewater flow a person has, the more the unit volume cost goes down, because it's a declining block. So in order to design a rate structure like that, we need to know how much volume falls into each block. That was information that Waterworks could not provide to us, so we had to make some assumptions for that. There's also, a difference between customers that have an established average winter quarter and customers that don't. Again, Waterworks could not provide us a breakdown of the of customers by each of those different categories. So it's really just more detail on the customer classes and then more detail on the wastewater flow and how it falls into each of those usage blocks.
So if we don't get the data, it's more of a guessing game? Is that?
We have to make some assumptions, yes.
Do you think we'll do that as far, kind of
There's been no shortage of effort
okay,
to get that done.
to get that done. So I would continue to support those efforts, and anything we can do as a commission to make that happen, I think, is to the benefit of the citizens who live in the city. So that's all I got.
I want to thank you for
Thank you.
Quick question.
bringing this forward and re-emphasizing that you, Black and Veitch, that we commissioned you to do this, and you did do an outstanding job. And it's not something that you're looking for, say, okay, now we did this, now we've got $1 million piece of equipment we want to sell you. That's not it. This is where your job ends. And so, it is very objective. And it's hitting us a little bit between the eyes, where, we need to see where we are, and we're in very, very poor shape, and we need to take action on this.
So my question is, just say if it was an emergency that occurred, where would we get the funds from?
Big sales.
Curious.
So we have items like our annual I&I, which is probably underfunded for the amount of work that we do, that we set aside.
And that's one thing that's been positive, right, in terms of.
It has,
in terms
it
of this
just needs
program.
to be done more.
Right.
So we would really just have to forego the minimal stuff that we do. So.
But continuing to do that's important. You pointed that out in your report, right, in terms of the I&I?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So,
But, you're treating water that doesn't provide any revenue for the utility. So obviously,
right.
that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, we appreciate you, man. Thank
Mike,
you.
I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What do you think in your expertise is the lifetime of the plant,
Well,
the existing plant?
we've actually been talking about this substantially more than we have in the past, because with the recent change in focus from KDHE on the nutrient removal, our time frame that we've been telling you for years about we need to think about a new plant has been greatly extended.
Okay.
So we've always said that we'll need to plan for a plant within the next 10 years. We said that for 5 or 10 years now. But I think that has changed to perhaps 25 years. So I asked Chuck to come up with a list of his items, and I have some of my own. What do we need to do to keep the plant in good condition? And fundamentally, the buildings are sound, the pipes are sound.
We've never hesitated putting money into it.
So it's things that are now, some of the mechanisms and the clarifiers are getting old. We've got a couple that have failed in the high winds that we had. So it's kind of that stuff that wears and tears operationally. And it wasn't too hard to come up with things that we can expect that we would need to do in the next 25 years of perhaps $700 to $1 million. And then there's another perhaps $1 million of things that'd be really nice to do in the next 25 years. But as far as the plant capacity, day-to-day things, we don't see a need for a capacity increase for sometime into the future, maybe 10 years or more. And we have fairly robust capacity into the plant. We might need better pumps or some other way to increase our capacity should we grow past our ability to treat. But the plant itself is in good shape. It ought to last 25 years if we take care of the moving parts.
Okay, thank you.
I have one other question, and don't name, but we kind of, in terms of the number of days of reserves, we're probably at the lower end of the spectrum on that, right? We reference other cities of our size, and is that fair?
Are you talking about just 3 or even the target of 30?
It's a target of 30, yeah.
You know, that's as low as we would go.
Most cities you've worked with are in that 30, 45, or 60-day range with respect to reserves?
Yeah,
Okay.
between 30 and 60, and again, it
Okay.
depends on if you want to access the revenue bond market. Obviously, you would want more for that.
Sure.
How many cities are 3 or less besides Leavenworth that you know of?
Oh, none.
Okay. That's where I thought it was, but so we are not on the lower tier, we're the lowest. Okay, okay, that's what I wanted. Okay.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Thank you, man, we appreciate it.
Thank you,
very much.
thank you.
All right, thank you for your
Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda, downtown parking discussion.
Pat, do you want to come up?
Is everybody here from downtown?
Yeah.
I think so.
So, Mr. Mayor and Commission, a couple weeks ago, it was determined that the commission wanted to talk about downtown parking a little bit based on some feedback that they had received and some concerns that some property owners, business owners in the downtown had brought up. Just an overview of the parking in the downtown, what we generally consider, the 28 blocks or so. There are about 25 lots from 3 Mile Creek north to Seneca and from the river west to 7th Street. Some of these, it's hard to count whether a parking lot is 2 or 3 lots. They're separated by medians or whatnot. Roughly 725 spots in this area, approximately 11.5 acres of municipal parking in the downtown. And listening to business owners since that study session and what was expressed that night, we've really honed in on the Delaware issue. So then we look at Delaware within 1 block of Delaware Street. There are approximately 11 parking lots. And 11 parking lots have about 500 spaces. But again, I think it's even a little bit more narrow than that. The correspondence we've received and some of the feedback we got is it seems to really be the 400 and 500 block of Delaware and the on-street parking specifically related to that.
Just those 2 blocks.
Just the 2 blocks of Delaware and those on-street parking. Everything that we've gotten so far has really just focused on those 2 blocks. So I wanted to go just briefly through a few of the aspects of parking. Loading zone, that was brought to our attention in 1 or 2 of the pieces of correspondence. A business may request a loading zone permit that comes to the police department for review. There's a $100 permit fee per year, and the service center installs a sign. The parking spot becomes a loading zone for, on essentially a 24/7 basis, and removes the parking place from the street. The chief believes we have about a half a dozen of those in the downtown, not specific to the 400 or 500 block of Delaware, but throughout the downtown. So not a whole lot of those.
Are there any in the 400, 500 block of Delaware that you can think of? Anyone here know any loading zones in 400, 500 block of Delaware? I can't think of any.
No.
I can't think of any. Okay.
So we've brought this issue before you. One thing I wanted to also touch on briefly was the parking enforcement. Up until the end of 2013, the police department employed a uniform parking enforcement officer for the downtown area. As the city faced difficult budget choices around that time, the city commission elected to end this function. In the final year of the dedicated downtown parking function, the city received about $5,000 in ticket revenue throughout the entire downtown. Salary and benefits of this person, overhead and such, around in the $50,000 mark. There's currently no time parking enforcement in the downtown. The police department, of course, replies to issues related to handicap parking violations as well as loading zone violations or anything else that rises to that level. So, I don't, Pat, did you have anything to add to the discussion?
That takes care of it. It was very simply an economic decision. Simply was not, the revenue simply just did not generate to support the parking enforcement. It was purely an economic decision.
Well, we have two memos, one from Mr. Marty Pope, who's a downtown businessman, and also Ms. Diana Barr. Could we have them come up and just kind of review just kind of review the memo? Are you willing to come up, Mr. Pope? Unless we got some other approach to this.
Are you done?
Yeah, I don't have anything else. It was just a general discussion was what I was.
Yes.
My name is Marty Pope. I own a business at 414 Delaware. And I gave you some information that was just number of parking spaces, number of handicapped parking spaces, number of storefronts, number of upstairs tenants, and number of unfinished upstairs areas, because I truly believe that we have to look toward the future, because a lot of our buildings are gaining upstairs lofts or office spaces or such as that. Do you have any questions of me as far as what the information I presented to you?
I don't have a question. It did strike me in terms of what happens on certain days in terms of street parking spaces taken up by business owners or their employees on a daily basis, with as many as 13 spaces taken up by these business owners or their employees on some days. I mean, that.
Well, I'm not arguing the fact. I'm a firm believer that we have lots of parking downtown. It's street parking. That's the issue.
But that's almost 50% of the
In our
spaces
block,
right now.
we have, just as an example, we have a recruiting office. And each of the recruiters has their own vehicle and a government vehicle. And sometimes they're gone for 2 and 3 days at a time, and those vehicles are parked on the street for that amount of time. We also have a tenant on our block that has a business in the front of his building and lives in an apartment in the back of his building, and his vehicle is parked on the street 24 hours a day. There are just some issues that when you look at the numbers and think that each of the tenants really has one parking space for their customers, when some people abuse it on a daily basis, it makes it difficult.
Sure.
Most of our customers, I own an antique business, most of our customers come from out of town. The folks that come from out of town lots of times find a public parking lot and walk the streets when the weather's nice. Somebody that's coming to pick up a piece of furniture, we will have them double park lots of times so we can load it. If somebody's coming directly to your business though, and yours alone, they like to have something within a block if possible. It's not always possible, but that's what they would like to see. I personally liked the 3-hour parking that we had and the enforcement of it. I think even if it was a part-time uniformed police officer downtown, just spot checking. And that might not be feasible budget-wise, I don't know, but I think just a uniform presence might help solve some other issues that occasionally crop up downtown.
What are the worst times of day? What are your hours? I mean, if there was someone there, what would be the best times for that?
A lot of the businesses, all of the businesses, of course, are closed on Sunday, almost all of them.
Right.
A lot of them are closed on Monday. Tuesday through Saturday are probably the times that the bulk of the businesses are open downtown, anywhere from 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 at night, generally, would cover most folks.
Okay.
Is there a certain time throughout the day that you're extremely busy? Any specific times?
Not specifically. Probably as the day goes on, there are fewer customers downtown. Mornings, maybe early afternoons.
More deliveries and that in the mornings? Not really?
Not really.
Not really,
no.
okay.
But the loading zone situation is not a problem in the 400 and 500 block of Delaware.
I don't know of any loading zones currently in the 400 or
Right,
500
okay.
block.
All right, just
Of
wanted
course,
to-
if there is something that's done on the 400 and 500 block of Delaware, that may force issues elsewhere downtown. I mean, if there was something that, some enforcement where a parking was limited in the 400 and 500 block of Delaware, those people are going to have to park somewhere. And it may pose problems in other blocks downtown.
Mr. Pope, you mentioned anecdotally about some recruiters that have 3 parking spaces, and if they're out of town, they just leave them on the street. Has anybody, are these military recruiters?
Yes.
Has anybody gone over and just said?
You
"Hey,"
bet.
And what do they say?
It's not so much what they said as the, the result. They just, seems like it happens more. And they have parking in the alley behind their
I
building.
know, I know.
They use the threat of vandalism or the fear of vandalism as an excuse, is why they park on the street rather than in the alley.
being vandalized in the alley.
Right, in the alley, or that they could also park in a
Do our
public
park-
parking
If
place.
they, we have a lot of public parking,
It just almost, a lot of these issues really are good neighbor issues, more than wanting us to play Solomon.
Good neighbor issues,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
But I don't know that it's fair also for the downtown merchants to be parking police. I mean, I think that, I think that probably everyone has been addressed as far as parking problems. I know Main Street is always preaching,
Right.
street parking is customer parking.
Right.
All of these businesses that we're talking about, or the vast majority of them, have rear entrances with a parking lot within probably a half a block. So I don't know that I think it's reached the point where it's difficult for it to be a good neighbor issue. That's my opinion.
when we had the 3-hour limit in the past, were there meters there for just kind of?
The attendant would go through and mark the vehicle, come back and check halfway, and then come back again and check at the 3-hour mark, and then if there was a violation, cite at that point.
Right.
And people were gaming the system then, they knew at 2.5 hours, they'd go move their car to another place, then the clock starts all over. Am I correct in that?
A different
Yeah.
block. I think.
Yeah, but I mean, unfortunately, people were gaming the system, whether it be
But of course,
employees.
that is different than 24 hours a day.
Yeah,
You know, even if they
yeah, now you
did
don't
move to a
have to
different
game the
block.
system, yeah, I understand.
Do you see a need for more handicap parking? I notice there's only 3 spaces on Delaware on that. Oh, that's just
I
a
don't-
400 block.
I honestly don't know in our block if there's a need for more handicapped. I'm not sure if that 3 handicapped is typical in a block. I don't know. I have to be honest, I don't know how that works.
That's done by ADA code,
Okay.
established occupancy and that kind of stuff determines how much handicap parking is established in a particular location.
Okay.
And there's very little, if no, wiggle room at all.
Okay.
And is,
handicap down by me, and mine is hit and miss. So I haven't noticed, my handicap parking as,
Can you come up,
to the
Pam?
podium?
Can you come up, please?
I'm new to downtown. I'm picket fences. I have been in town for 25 years. On the parking issue, the only thing I can tell you, I was totally appalled that this winter, that when it was cold, and we had a very cold winter, that everybody was parking on the main drag. It doesn't make a difference if it's raining, if there's snow all over, there's no place, for our customers to park. The thing with the alley, I walk my alley, I park behind my store and I walk the alley. Yes, I have homeless in the back of my alley that has took up one of the trash things in the back. I still walk it. I walk out at night, and stuff like that. I'm pleasant to them, they're pleasant to me, so it's not an issue, that way, with me. But I can tell you that I did one morning walk, in my back parking lot. If it's icy, I cannot walk my alley, and that because it's a sheet of ice. Mm-hmm. And if it's raining, I can't walk my alley because the gutters, are way up here, so it's pretty, that's a waterfall. So I cut through Country Club Bank, so they're used to me. I just wave them as I go through, the bank. And anyway, but I walked out one morning. It was not 10 o'clock yet. We had an elderly person, and we talked just a minute ago about the baby boomers, how they're getting old. Baby boomers will stay in town, these older people. They're not your walking people. They need a parking space in town. So anyway, this morning before 10 o'clock, I walked outside the bank, and here was this little lady parked past between the bank and the bicycle shop. Mm-hmm. And I hollered at her, and I says, "Oh my gosh, don't move." And I walked up to her, and I told her I was picket fences, and I would come back to her, and I did come back to her. And I asked her, "Where are you going this morning?" And she says, "Honey, I just want to go to the quilt shop." And she said this was the closest parking lot.
Walk away, yeah.
And that's at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And stuff. And some of the sidewalks hadn't been cleaned yet. And I told her, between your cane, your two legs, and my two, we're going to make this, down there, stuff. And I did walk her down there. But this is something that happens a lot, downtown with the people. I know I was here for a study once before, and they said the average shopper downtown was 45 and below. That's not my shopper. I have a lot of retired military, and stuff like that shop with me and stuff. And I have a lot of ladies that I have to carry their stuff to the car. And I told them, if you just make it, or I don't care if they're a block away, I will shut my door and walk you to your car, to do it. But I have to say, I was totally appalled. I thought I'd done my homework when I moved downtown. I moved downtown because I had to change some of my business around, and so I didn't want my overhead that I had downtown, or, at the place. But I literally thought, I came downtown, I looked at the streets. Some days it was busy, some days there was parking holes. I didn't do my justice in walking into every store and asking, "Is that your car?" I did, though, when you want us to be the police for downtown. I did walk in the day before I opened to one of the businesses that parks 2 cars. Never parks at his front door, but he does the one before and the one after. And I asked his employee, after I found out who it was, for the 3 months that I was getting ready, I just nicely said, "I'm opening tomorrow, and I wish you could find someplace else to park the car." The hands went up in the air, and she said, "How about I just stay away from your place?" And I was nice, and I says, "Don't think it comes to that, but I don't think we need to be the police, to do this. It's not working, and I think I made it kind of verbal since I moved down there, that I moved down there, I still want the same business that I had out on 4th Street, and stuff like that. I realized I came from a big parking lot, paid a lot of money for that parking lot, but I did expect to have more than what I did, and stuff for the winter. I have a Facebook page. I did put it on there today about the meeting. I have to remind everybody, we are not the Legends. And I'm sure that all of you went Christmas shopping at the Legends in Zona Rosa. You'll walk a mile. But in a small downtown area, you drive downtown, and if there's no parking, what comes out of their mouth? And more people have came in the shop and told me this.
You go to Zona Rosa?
Yeah.
Yep.
"Oh, well, I don't need it. I'll come back some other time." So you can give away your government grants. I did get one, for the front of my building, and some repairs that I did to it. You can give away government grants, you can give money for repairment downtown, but if your businesses downtown don't have parking, you know, for those people, you know, to park, and I think it's great on a warm day. I do think people walk and they don't think anything of it. I am a firm believer we do have lots of parking lots. I would like to see, which I have listened to this day, so I know that money is tight, but I would like some better signs that say public parking lots, you know, and stuff like that. But it is a lot of parking downtown that is cars that never move. So.
And a lot of those.
You could,
Gabby, come up here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I'm on the 500 block of Delaware. And a lot of the cars that are there are people that are living in the apartments above.
Right.
They'll leave their car there all night long. Sometimes if they're gone for just like the recruiters, right, if they're gone for the weekend or something, they'll sit there all weekend long.
We should be able to do something about that. My daughter lives in Hoboken, New Jersey, and they have the same thing, Washington Street, and they're able to stay there overnight, but come 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, they're out of there, or they get a ticket. So I think we just need to
That's
figure.
no parking at all then, on the next morning.
Right, there's well,
Yeah, that's a little bit
well,
different.
no, they actually have, you know, a 2-hour period where they clean the streets and things like that.
Yeah,
But-
and no, they have it in big cities, or, you
Yeah.
know, you can park, you know, midnight to 7, but after 7, no parking.
Right.
And if you're caught there, we don't
Yeah.
want that, because obviously you have to have parking, but
Yeah. And we have one customer, just one anecdote, that I think she's about 80 or so, and she uses 2 canes to walk. And she will drive around the block for, 25 minutes looking for a place to park. And if she doesn't find one, she can't make it from the parking lots.
So
So,
that's why I'm wondering about the handicap parking.
yeah,
too,
and there's a
if
handicap,
possibly
there's a
have
handicap
more.
spot, across the street from us at, right by the antique mall, but it's even hard for her to walk from there.
sir, would you identify yourself with TV in your business?
Yeah, I'm Kevin Gensler. My wife and I own Queens Country Teas downtown.
Great.
So it is a problem, and it's a combination of businesses that don't pay attention and won't do the right thing, and then the people that are starting to move into the apartments upstairs.
So you think we can notify the landlords for the business?
The landlords usually, many of the landlords will tell their tenants that they are not allowed to park on the street during the business day, but it doesn't really matter. They can't enforce it anyway.
You got any recommendations, chief?
Go ahead.
There's, the one thing I was gonna ask the chief about, I mean, the parking with the snow, I mean, that car staying there for 2-3 days, I mean, is there anything we could do from, aren't they, maybe they're not emergency snow routes, but they are pretty important routes.
That's an enforcement issue. We can enforce that. Okay, I agree completely with the sentiment tonight that there's essentially 2 problems, one of which it's the folks that live upstairs parking downstairs. To the extent that we entertain complaints, which is not very often, that's what it is, folks won't do that. And then the business owner or employees parking in front of businesses on the street. If you would like, we could change, we have essentially for a while been responding to complaints. We don't really go offensively looking for parking violations. That's a function of staffing and busy and that sort of thing. If you would like us to do that, we can do that and be much more aggressive in our posture in terms of the strict, you can't park 24 hours and that sort of thing. We can try that strategy for a while. We're gonna get some complaints about that, but that's okay, we can try that. Invariably, what's gonna happen, we're gonna catch a customer or 2 that, we didn't intend to, because it can't be selective, we're just targeting the business owners or the people that live upstairs. If there's a violation, whoever that is, and so that's what we have to be mindful of in terms of enforcement. We can try that strategy and be a little bit more aggressive, go on the offense instead of being reactive, we can try that. I can't commit to that every day, that we're gonna spend all day downtown, doing that in terms of staffing and stuff, in terms of our busy level, but we can do that.
Well, even if it could just be spot time
Right.
checking,
Right.
once in a while.
So we can do
They wouldn't know
that.
when they're coming.
Right, we can do that.
But that would require us to change our ordinances on parking. Right now, we
I don't
don't.
think so.
There's 3-hour parking signs downtown.
The signs we left up, the ordinance changed. So in the event that at some point in the future, we were gonna put that back in place.
Right.
So the signs are cosmetic.
I realize that we've got a 2-block problem, and it's an issue, and obviously people here are doing it. But I think I can remember, but I mean, 400 and 500 block of Delaware is where the issue is.
There were 28 blocks.
But I can remember, I think Commissioner Dedek can remember, and the chief, 6 years ago, before we got rid of the parking attendant, we had some of these same meetings. I mean, some of the same things were happening. Even with enforcement, you know, with people say, well, they're gaming the system, they're moving, and they were completely legal in so doing. You know, I want to try to figure out how to fix this, but I just think there's so many unintended consequences, and I don't know if there is a panacea that's going to correct all of this.
I think it helped having Stacy down there, I really do.
We had the same complaints,
I don't think it
basically the
was
same.
as bad as it is. I mean, you literally cannot find a place to park when you're going
Well,
down.
just to start it off, I think just the presence itself would help out, you know, at least get the word out there,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, just spot checking, I think would help. Plus
If
maybe
we do
catch
that,
some of
we have
these-
to look at that budget, and we're looking at January for a clerk.
Just
Talking
start
about
going.
existing.
I think it's been a little while, but I believe specific to the central business district, there's a specific ordinance about leaving your car parked there for 24 consecutive hours.
Oh, we do have something there?
But I reserve the right to check, it's been a
Okay,
little while since I
okay.
looked, to make sure, but I believe there is something specific that would allow some enforcement action. But that doesn't require another person. It requires us to be available to do that and be a little bit more offensive in our strategy, which we can do.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, we're gonna catch a customer or two.
Yep.
So when you get a call from somebody fussing that they went downtown to shop and got a parking ticket, okay, you're gonna have to remain committed that we're trying as best we can, and we cannot distinguish business owners, recruiters, or whatever. If there's a violation, there's a violation, and we will issue that, and you're likely to catch a few fish you weren't trying to catch. And so just understand for a while that's gonna happen. So we all need to be ready for that and entertain those kinds of complaints until sort of maybe the environment gets a little bit better down there. Okay?
I can remember a case, Mr. Stiglmeyer's, I see him back there. Somebody in an apartment, not necessarily above his building, but he parked his vehicle in front of Mr. Stiglmeyer's business and left it there all the time. It went right across the street, it's a public parking lot, and he just, I'm sure Mr. Stiglmeyer, you've talked with him, I'm sure he left notes on his car and everything, and it just amazes me that, you know,
Do we have
people-
adequate, you think we could look, no decision or anything tonight, but is there, I mean, what about signage? I mean, is the signage or just directing people who are going downtown to the many parking lots we have, is it adequate? I'm asking the question, I don't know.
The only thing I'd say is, and from what I've heard tonight is reinforce what we've heard before, is the people who are doing this know they're doing it and know where that other parking is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, right.
You don't want to walk it out.
Yeah.
These are the people you can't shame into saying, because I think you've tried, everyone's tried.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's interesting that you say that the signage, the 3-hour parking is window dressing. A little bit more window dressing is the Leavenworth County, or City of Leavenworth's webpage. It says, when you look at traffic enforcement, specifically, it says that as a part of the traffic unit, the parking enforcement officer, this is today, current, patrols the downtown area by vehicle and on foot, searching out violations and issuing citations. Completely false. But you are putting it out there that that is what you're doing. As a sovereign, you are entrusted with law enforcement. Law enforcement cannot be delegated
You want to
to
stay
a
close to the mic.
non-government
Close to the mic.
Back up to the
entity.
mic.
So no matter how much somebody may say, well, put a note on the door, or the downtown merchants ought to, or neighbors ought to, I am the person who went and spoke to the National Guard recruiters. And it worked one day. But without the mechanism by which to enforce it, speaking to the offenders, as me as a citizen, my name is Mark Cipriano. I own the commercial real estate at 414, 416, and 418 Delaware. Additionally, I own residential property here in town. I am not from Leavenworth. I chose to move to Leavenworth, in part for the residents and in part for the commercial opportunity. When we talk about, well, the economics of parking enforcement, law enforcement is not a self-funding entity. I am sure that the police department does not survive on the revenues it generates by itself. So by having a $50,000 employee generating $5,000, that is probably a lot more than any other police officer is generating in Leavenworth. Law enforcement does not and should not generate revenues. The parking fees that are collected offset costs. So to argue economics, well, law enforcement is too expensive. It doesn't make sense to enforce the law. Well, this is probably the only town who, A, cannot figure out how to enforce parking, because every other city across this country can figure out how to do it. Having had a military career, I lived in a lot of different places, a lot of parking enforcement in a lot of towns. And it was towns who wanted to be a destination. You look at a nearby town like Lawrence. Lawrence on Massachusetts Avenue has one of the most aggressive parking enforcement programs that I have ever seen. I've lived in Washington, D.C., in New York City, and the parking enforcement is not as aggressive as in Lawrence. But why does Lawrence do it? Lawrence wants to be a destination. It wants to bring people in. Who does Leavenworth want to be? What does Leavenworth want to be? Do they want to go back to that period of time when the downtown was an economic blight? Or is Leavenworth going to capitalize on its downtown? Is Leavenworth going to actually try to draw people in? The Main Street program has done a phenomenal job at advertising in cities within, say, about a 200-mile drive to Leavenworth. Bring people to Leavenworth. But if people have a negative experience, other than the one or two fish that are going to be caught up in the 3-hour random parking enforcement, which is not likely going to be the problem, although along that line you have to weigh the pros and the cons. Do we have good parking at the cost of losing a customer, or do we have bad parking at the cost of losing a lot of customers? As a real estate owner, I am paying to Leavenworth my money based on the value of my property. When downtown Leavenworth starts losing businesses, starts losing customers, what happens to my property? It goes down. What happens to your revenue? It goes down. At some point, I end up having to say, time to sell, let's leave that building empty for years. Then, as a resident, I say, why would I want to live in Leavenworth? The people who we have elected and who will be coming up for re-election, they're not representing my interests. I'm a resident and a property owner. What else do? I have a tenant, Marty Pope, who collects sales tax. And what happens to a portion of that sales tax? It ends up here again. So for every customer that won't come to downtown Leavenworth and go to his store or her store or their store, what happens when they don't walk through that door? You are not collecting revenue. And revenue, which is paying for law enforcement, because law enforcement is not a revenue-generating entity. And it is also not an authority that can be delegated to civilians. So, one concern I'm hearing, let's put a Band-Aid on it. Let's talk about the 400 and 500 blocks. What happens to the 400 and 500 blocks once some parking enforcement happens? The offenders are going to move. And then you're going to be hearing from the 300 and the 600 block. You're going to be hearing from Cherokee. You're going to be hearing from all of the cross streets. Again, there are fixes, and they're not difficult. Every other city that tries to draw people into their city to increase revenues, to increase the reputation of the town, have figured it out. A permanent position such as Stacy was great. I saw parking enforcement with Stacy and after Stacy. To go to Mr. Kitchen's concerns about that one customer and the angry phone calls that the commission is going to get because of that one customer, Stacy was great because not only was she a uniform presence in downtown, but she also would say, do you know whose car this is? And would occasionally go and seek them out and say, you've got to move. There's a balance in law enforcement. Having been a criminal law attorney for years and ultimately becoming a felony court judge, I know that there is a balance between what is right and what can be done. So the problem is not insurmountable. It is not going to be outrageously expensive. But there are economic costs beyond the shortfall between law enforcement collection and the revenues generated.
How do you spell your last name?
Thank you, sir.
How do you spell your last name?
It's C as in Charlie, I-P-R-I-A-N-O.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your
Thank you.
comments.
Appreciate it.
If it counts, I got a ticket downtown Lawrence and didn't stop me from shopping.
Yes, we greatly appreciate it. Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm not going to try to follow that because that
Are you Diana?
That's
No.
not fair. It's important that everybody's voice
Yeah.
be heard.
Sure.
My name is Sheila I, and I'm one of the tenants that live up above some of the businesses in the 4th and 5th block. I just wanted to say that there is a balance that has to be met because you want people living downtown. I shop downtown because I live downtown. I work with almost 200 people, and few of them shop downtown because they don't live downtown. And the Legends is 20 minutes one way, and Zona Rosa is 20 minutes another way. So we definitely want to be careful in not running anyone off. I definitely think that business owners should not park during the day hours where they want their customers or their next door neighbor businesses, customers to park. I also agree that if you fix the problem in the 4th and 500 block of Delaware, that it's going to bleed out over into others. I know when Cransers has a big event, that they move down to Cherokee and the 500 block parking down there, which then is an issue with Tenpenny and the VA and everything. So I know that, the ripple effect of that is would definitely be felt as well, so
Where do
thank you.
you say you live in a loft?
In a loft apartment.
Where do you park normally?
We actually are fortunate that behind our
Oh, you have a
building,
station.
we actually have 2 parking spots that we
okay.
pull in behind.
You come in through the alley and park there?
Right,
Okay.
right. But we also share it with homeless people that are, so. That's a whole nother topic, I'm certain, but anyway, thank you for hearing me.
Okay, thank you. Who are you calling on?
Is it Jason?
Yes.
All right.
Good evening, I'm Jason Clare. My wife Julie and I own Overlook Antiques and Military Surplus at 406 Delaware. And I just wanted to say that when Stacy's position was terminated, I thought that was a real loss to the community. She was really an asset to all of us downtown. She was kind of like a liaison between law enforcement and the businesses and really communicated well. And I thought she did a pretty good job. You know, and I know it was economics that kind of terminated that position. But it was also a position that somewhat funded itself. You know, in many positions, if you look at a parks employee or a community development, they don't fund their positions. It's a paid position. But it was beneficial. You know, it really was a beneficial position to the city. And once it went away, yes, people started parking in the street and abusing that 3-hour limit, which actually went away. I would really encourage you to.
Can I ask you a quick question? I don't mean to stop your movement here, but where were you and all these other people when we talked about this same problem 4 different times?
When was it? I mean.
Through the course of the years, from 10 years ago to current.
A lot of us were here.
Well,
I mean, he was.
yeah, I've been downtown for almost 11 years now.
Yeah.
But,
And
well.
Stacy was involved in that conversation, so.
Yeah, well, I wasn't as involved in the process as I am now. And I'll share some photographs with you here in just a moment of something that wouldn't have happened under Stacy's
I
watch.
need a break. Yeah, whenever they get down, I need a break.
After you speak, yeah, we'll take about,
Okay.
after you speak, we'll take a quick 5 minutes.
However, if the position needs to justify itself as far as financially, perhaps incorporate some other duties that code enforcement is currently taking care of, such as sign permits or some other duties that may be able to be taken off of their shoulders and incorporated into a position as a traffic enforcement officer. And to go back to your question, in January, on Thursdays, I walk down to the community center for lunch, and sometimes I walk or drive, and I started noticing a car in front of the Leavenworth Youth Achievement Center. And at first I thought it was just kind of a joke because it was a Mercury Cougar and the windows were down 5 inches on either side and it was raining. Somebody's gonna have a saggy bottom when they come out. Well, the next week it was still there with the windows down 5 inches. And then a snowstorm came. And then the snow melted. And then another snowstorm came. And the windows are still down 5 inches and the car is still in the same spot. Well, I started photographing it. And from January 29th.
Did you call the police?
Well.
I mean, I call the police on my neighbor because they park in the street and leave their car sit there dead for a month.
No, I didn't. And, it wasn't bothering me. So, and it wasn't really a violation because it wasn't illegally parked. The tags were current.
It is a violation if it's just sitting.
But the 3-hour limit, to my knowledge, the 3-hour parking limit had been repealed. It was no longer being enforced.
It's not 3 hours, it's 24 hours.
Well, I wasn't aware of that because from what my experience was a 3-hour limit and they stopped enforcing it. However, from January 29th until February 15th, that car sat unmoved on the city street. I'm not the only one that could have noticed it. I'm not the only one that could have called the police. I'm not a police officer patrolling Delaware Street. Nobody did anything about it for at least 18 days from my photographs. That car was there before that and was there after that. It disappeared, I think, late February. Point is nobody did anything about it.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate it, and we hear the complaints, and we know that there is a huge need. We're not gonna be able to make a final decision tonight, but we will definitely readdress the issue, and maybe you can come back with some options on something that we could do, possibly look at the parking officer once again, you know what I mean? So we
Can I propose that the city just send out?
come up here real quick.
You gotta come up when you talk.
Can I propose?
Yes, ma'am.
That the city sends out a letter?
Won't do any good.
Well, it's gotta be doing something. If you sent me a letter, because I'm gonna tell you how many times you sent me a felony letter out of the other
You're a
place.
responsible person.
Well,
And most of these people
Well,
are.
well, that could be true too, but I think sometimes just a letter telling, we are going to start and enforce this.
Yes,
We need
ma'am.
your car
But-
moved, you know, and some, I think that would help some until we can figure out what to do with the other.
Yes, ma'am, that will be our first step.
Yes,
Yes,
and I may need a job if I don't get customers, I can go mark the cars for you and take that.
Great.
Hey, before anybody else come up and speak, we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break, all right?
Yeah, got it, I got it.
Go ahead, you good.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ron, I can't.
Are you local 10th Avenue?
No.
Okay, I'm on the, all right.
What's been the benefit tonight is that I think we've got more
We cut parks maintenance, we cut streets, we cut 7 or 8 positions.
That's what I was gonna mention. I'm gonna mention that when we come
So it wasn't just, let's do this, it was, we had to cut, I think it was $775,000. And it was presented like a list of 50 things and it was like 5 or 6 years ago, 2013. You know, and a lot of these.
We cut many positions the years ago. Parking, like right across the road, there's parking. $600 up here at the Leavenworth. It's Delaware, it's just it's parking lot. Physically there, people have to walk up through the alley.
I did learn that I am not set up in a beach lifestyle. My mother-in-law, she had a look at this, she was gonna rent a house for a month on the beach, so they've been down there for a month. Dude, I am talking about a house 50 feet beach on an island. It's just not from there, it's not, sort of takes a long time to get to. All the houses are still like 25 feet up. So they're it's good for a week. It's not good long. It's not gonna be some surface. I had never done that for the first time. There's a small little, you're not big enough. The place was locked down there, they had a golf course on the golf. Golf? Oil spills. Yeah, it's the Gulf. The Gulf is all over.
Yeah, I sit there, take a picture, take a picture.
So we have
Yeah, that page just was never changed, but it also refers to the traffic.
We do. That's not true. We do have routes. The route is back in
She was not a certified police officer.
I'm not jumping to that, that is the latest action, but
Thank you.
I'm not hung up on that.
Good.
Think you're better.
So we got 2 people, 2 minutes. This is
Okay, I can say one quick thing.
Want to start off?
Yeah, just one. This gavel is in.
Take a break.
Back to where we were.
And we just want to thank you all for coming out and expressing your concerns. Just for the sake of time, and we still have another item on the agenda. We're going to have 2 more individuals to speak. 2 minutes apiece, please.
And I'm, Mr. Mayor, I say one thing. We all know Stacy and what a great gal she was, and for those of you who want to see her, she's at Veitch at Price Chopper, and she's always fun to stop by and see. When we did make that cut in 2013, and she wasn't the only cut. We cut a police officer, a lieutenant, I believe, a detective. We cut a firefighter, somebody in the streets. $700,000 or $800,000 in cuts. And the years before that, we had to cut other people because the budget just required that. So it wasn't, we didn't just cut Stacy that year. There was a whole group of folks. But I do understand, the personality that Stacy had downtown was just outstanding. And once again, she had the same personality in the bakery at Price Chopper, for those of you that want to see her. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thanks for hearing us tonight. My name is Sue Soxie, and I've had a business, Soul Supply, in the 700 block of Cherokee Street for 13 years. It's right next to Merriweather's. And you guys were zoning in on the 400 and 500 block of Delaware, and I just want to make sure that you do not forget us down on Cherokee.
Right.
And I
the
know
whole downtown.
even Merriweather's, they love their business and it's their customers going in. They would love to see it turn faster and have those spots opened up as well. So please, any of the side streets, please don't forget us. And anywhere that you could put in slanted parking, anywhere we could get more parking. Diagonal parking, we'd love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
My name is Ron Booth, and I own a building at 5th in Delaware. I came to town in May of 1973, and I've been in business that entire time. And everybody's right here. We discussed, back in those days, we had parking meters, and we've done the whole gamut here. I think that what I see here, we need to kind of get off dead center and start somewhere. I think that if you do call the police, they've been very good to me and always responsive. I don't think that we need a uniformed policeman down doing that. I think that perhaps we could get a city employee cover us liability-wise that could maybe work 15, 20 hours per week and work random hours. And between Tuesday and Saturday would probably be a good thing. They don't need to have the pay as a uniformed officer. They wouldn't be armed, but they could have some kind of city identification. It could be one of the vests that could be colored and say parking enforcement or just public relations, because you are correct there too. We have to have a person who is going to stimulate business and stimulate tourists. I see most of the violators actually being local people. They're not the out-of-town people, because they'll ask, well, where can I park? How long do I get to park? They see the 3-hour parking meters. So I think that I don't know how we would do it through the city commission. Maybe Paul can just get a few guidelines together and meet with the chief and put it on Paul's back, which he has anything else to do, with sewers and water and all that. But I think that this consistency here is that it has to be somebody besides our fellow citizens, because I've done that too. It has to be, doesn't need to be a uniform officer, I don't think, but it needs to be somebody that has some third party authority. I love Stacy as a person. Stacy, I'll just be honest with you, I'll be transparent here. Stacy may shoot me at Price Hopper, but there was a lot of transparent enforcement going on. I'm going to call a spade, and so I think that we weren't getting our bang for our buck there. And well, she had a great personality, sure, and but I think anybody is totally honest, they can attest to a lot of selective activity there. I don't know where the parking meter thing even ended up, so I'm going to take my time and go back and take my seat. But I think we do need to get something going off of Dead Center, but yet it's a touchy situation. The police can't be doing this, I don't think, to any kind of degree. And I don't think that, I just don't know, I don't have an answer. Maybe Paul could maybe get with Pat and, I don't know, about liability. See, I'm looking from my side to your side. You have to get with liability. What can this person do? What can't they do? What if somebody punches this person out on the street? You see the problem here? It's more involved like everything else in life. So, but I think the mayor, maybe we can get some kind of consensus and make a few things going. The 24-hour thing, I don't know if it's a regulation or not. I've never seen all the parking regulations. But here again, how do you let the public know? The newspaper only has a certain amount of circulation. We have the city flyer that comes out. How many people read that about even scooping their darn sidewalks? So there's a problem about letting the public know. We need some kind of...
If you see a car parked for a month, then wouldn't you think you would...
Well, you're right. It could be like a $5 ticket, or maybe just a warning, and then a $5 ticket, maybe a $10 ticket. It's just a tough situation. Sue is correct. It's all the streets. It's Fifth Street.
Yeah.
It's all these streets. It's the Air Force is going to move from downtown because problem there too. And they did have a regulation in their lease that they wanted to park right in front of their building because of supposed vandalism, but. Okay, Mayor, well, you've got to hurt a lot of wild, I'm watching my time, I got 10 seconds. So you're hurting a lot of wild cats here, but we have to get off Dead Center, and there's a few things everybody has said. It can't be the fellow merchants, it can't be Main Street. Somebody's got to have some enforcement.
And it should be for the entire downtown area.
Yes, sir.
Right?
The whole area.
28 blocks.
The whole area. And,
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
like Pat's saying, it can't be selective, it's got to be.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Hey,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, just once again,
Something that works.
I'm going to squeeze in here real quick, and I won't take 2 minutes, I promise. I'm Marie McKenzie. Connie and I own First City Quilts. We weren't at the meetings because we just started 2 years ago. We took over Meadows Quilting and Sewing. I personally addressed one of the therapists that's upstairs. We had a verbal altercation in the parking lot. She went and had her husband get a lawyer and say that she was allowed to park wherever she wanted to and that there was no enforcement of parking spaces and like that. So, again, the good neighbor thing only goes so far. But I'm not going to come up here and complain without offering a suggestion. And this is where, for the police, your comment about the fish, getting a couple customers that would be angry with us, why not do the letter, even though you think it may not work? Have all of us business owners, landlords, and tenants write down our make, model, VIN number, license plate number, and then those that are still sitting there on the streets all day long, and we'll report each other. I guarantee you'll get phone calls because we know exactly who they are, and then you'll have the license plate number, make and model, and I'll even take pictures of the cars that are sitting there because that's what I had to do with her upstairs.
I think you got some help now, Chief. Hey, thank you, man. Hey, we appreciate it.
I think I'm going to have some more verbal altercations.
Hey, so Paul, do you think we can send out a letter? Do we have consensus to send out a letter?
This is what I recommend.
I don't think we need to.
I think we just.
We'll revisit it, revisit.
We want to revisit, we want to hear
Yeah.
what he's got.
Just to address it comprehensively, I think I have a much better understanding of the entirety of, or the problem, which is the first step in coming up with a solution or solutions. So I just think we're gonna need to come back and address it at a future study session.
Yeah.
Because there are various options, and I'm
I
not
just want
committed to
some-
any one or the other. I do believe that we, as a commissioner, or at least this is one commissioner who thinks that we need to do everything possible to facilitate business for the downtown business owners. And anything that's an obstacle to that we can have an effect on, I'm all for implementing sound, common sense courses of action or options to alleviate or at least mitigate this problem. So.
So can you come back with us with the list of options, some things that we could possibly do?
Yeah.
Another study session.
You know, can I say something
Yes,
here?
ma'am, you should.
We started talking about this about a year ago. Again, about having someone downtown to look around because of the homeless situation.
Yeah.
And it brought that up to us too. I mean, we've been talking
Yeah,
about
no,
this for some time. I think just getting information on what our ordinances are, I mean,
That's
out to the
important.
public
That's important.
Education.
is good. I mean, public education is good. But I really think having someone downtown to see those things, you know, to catch those things that may be causing trouble, to prevent burglaries, to prevent, you know, other things down there. It's not just about parking. We've talked about having someone down there because of other reasons as well. So I think we really need to look at that and think about some decisions on that.
Yeah, it's not something we haven't done in the recent past, and we wouldn't
Yes, sir.
be reinventing the wheel, so we could certainly bring some of those options to the commission.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you all downtown, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, next item on the agenda, Police Department 2018
Tenth
annual
Avenue
report.
repair.
No, you missed one.
Oh,
We got two things on the agenda.
10th Avenue Road Repair Project.
Yeah, I'm gonna let everybody, we have a few staying.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
Hey,
you all.
please.
Thank you for hearing.
Thank you.
Man, appreciate
Thanks for your
it.
comments.
We want to fix it. It needs it, it needs it.
Go ahead, if you're gonna talk, why don't you go out in the hallway there, please?
Mr. Mayor and Commission, I'm here to update you on the 10th Avenue Road Repair Project. As the commission is aware, there was no planned repairs for 10th Avenue in the 2019 pavement management program. To recap that program, that's 14 miles of overlay on city streets. That's the final phase of 20th Street. That's the Thornton Street standalone complete reconstruction. That is all included in the 2019. However, 10th Street is not an unknown entity, a failure of deterioration of concrete. Staff had tentatively planned to bring that forward as a phased approach with some of the 20th Street dollars going forward or other options for the city commission. However, it was the governing body's directive to me to see what we could do in a much more expedited fashion. So we have done that. We followed the direction from the city commission. The city has already issued an RFQ, which we have already gotten quite a bit of feedback for, which closes at the end of this month. The RFQ has 5 key factors in it that a firm would do, a design firm: a concrete pavement condition analysis, a curb condition analysis, a rehab or replacement recommendation, cost estimates for rehab and replacement, and cost-benefit analysis for rehab and replacement. I'm going to go through why each of those points is so important, why we need that information. Concrete pavement condition analysis, we need to know where the concrete is failing. Is it failing all the way to the base rock? Is it failing a couple inches below the surface? Core sampling in various areas will give us a better idea of the concrete condition analysis. Curb condition analysis. I think the curbs may end up not needing to be replaced. We need to know that. We need to have not just visual, but we need an engineering firm to evaluate the curbs so that potentially a repair could be less expensive because we would only focus on the roadway. Rehab or replacement recommendations. I think this is the biggest factor in this RFQ, this first phase of the RFQ is, does the road need to be replaced? Do we need to do what we're doing in Thornton and tear it all the way out and build back? Or is there a depth at which the underlying concrete is stable to the fact that we could then overlay it with 2, 3, 4, 5 inches of asphalt? So we need to know that there's considerable cost differences in those, and it will affect how quickly or how long this project could take. Cost estimates for rehab and replacement, you can't know where you're going if you don't know the cost. We need to know if rehab is a viable option, and if it is, what it costs. And then if replacement is the only viable option, how much is that going to cost the city? And then, of course, the cost-benefit analysis. I spoke to the mayor about this. There could be the case, and I hate to speculate too much ahead of this report, where an overlay of asphalt could be a 3 to 5 year fix, say. Then giving the city time to prepare financing for a complete replacement that may be $3, $4, $5 million. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of the study, but I want to give those options to the commission about what do you want to do based on the costs and based on the timing. So that will all be covered in the RFQ that's out right now. Those are due a week from Friday. City staff will interview. These are not proposals, they're not cost-based proposals. These are requests for qualifications. The most qualified firm in this work. We will select a firm and we will have them start on that RFQ. We will stress the importance of getting it done as quickly as possible and getting this data to you so you can evaluate what we can do. I'm not going to get into whether if the rehab comes back as a viable option, can we do it in 19? I think that's getting ahead of ourselves. I think we need to get this data, review it with you, with the engineering firm, with staff, and make the determination going forward. I've included the RFQ, but it includes those same aspects. We would not then enter into another proposal for a design contract. We would essentially do just a phase 2 with the firm that we've selected so we could cut down on that time. And so that would be the plan to get you the information you need to make the right decision.
And when would this information come back to us? I mean, after they're finished with their work?
Once
What time frame?
we select the firm, 30 to 45 days, maybe pushing them to get all this done with the core samplings and the material estimates, but we will push to get this done as quick as possible. And that'll be part of the interview process. Do you have people ready right now who can do this? Or do you have other obligations that are going to prevent you from getting to this? So quality and the ability to get it done as quickly as possible.
Any other questions or comments?
Look forward to it.
Looks good, yeah. Sounds good to me.
It's good initiative.
All right, well, next item on the agenda, number 5, Police Department 2018 annual report.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, I'm pleased to be present this evening to present to you the 2018 Leavenworth Police Department annual report. Every day and all year long, the police department collects a vast amount of data, and we try and use that information to make decisions about public safety and policing. We identify crime trends, et cetera, to help us in our mission. Right after the first of the year, through the first couple of months, we collate all that information and put it in a singular document that's present tonight. It's important to understand that not everything that we do is encapsulated in this document. We have much more vast information. The other part I want to reiterate is that this is not the only tool that we use to try and get a sense of how we're doing in the community. Very often I try and get a sense about how people are feeling, whether the community, whether the members in the community feel safe, as well as, whatever particular data might suggest that a crime trend is going in a particular direction. And so it is not my intention tonight to go through every single slide and comment for, minutes and minutes. I imagine you, given tonight's agenda, are ready to move along. But I do want to highlight a few things and start with essentially my message. That's the chart. The overall crime rate in the city of Leavenworth last year was down by about 1%. That's in everything that we do. If you look a little deeper into that, Part 1 crimes were down 4.1%. I'll share with you in a minute what that means. That is a much more relevant factor. We continue to struggle with mental illness as our primary public safety factor. I'll explain that in detail in a little bit. We went to 218 calls. We are creeping up on about once a day with a mental illness call, and that is taxing our resources. It takes a lot of people and a lot of time to sort through there. It's very dangerous. and takes a tremendous effort to handle those things
Wow,
safely. So
once a day, wow.
almost once a day now. We did see a reduction in domestic violence calls down to 690 from 827. I'm very happy about that. I'm hopeful that that is not an indication that less people are reporting, but somewhere in the middle of less calls and less reporting is probably an accurate assessment of that information. So that's a very positive number. We continue to struggle as a profession in terms of hiring and retention. We have about 9 openings today. We're making some progress in terms of more people applying for the job. We'll see how that goes, with that. But everybody is dealing with that. I read some stuff today. I think the Philadelphia Police Department has 800 openings. The Dallas Police Department has 400 openings. Everything's relative, in terms of how big you are and the size. So we're all struggling with that. Let's get into.
Can you, before hitting on staffing, can you talk about, just briefly, sort of how the applicants, although they've increased, sort of the new challenges you're dealing with some of the people who are choosing law enforcement?
I don't like, I think the millennials get bashed an awful lot, about, that seems to be an excuse for everything.
Watch it.
Right. You're not old, you're too old to be a millennial, right?
32. 32. 35's cut off.
So we are seeing, so we've had people wash out of the training program. We go through this process, we hire them. They sort of get into it and they're thinking to themselves, boy, this is not what I envisioned it was gonna be. And you just scratch your head with that. I don't know what in the world you thought you were getting into, but it's really, and it comes out of left field sometimes, your head scratches about, they'll come in, you'll go through every conceivable test that we have to try and get a sense that they're doing it. They're there for a month and they're like, nope, this is not for me. I'm not sure exactly what I was getting into, but this isn't it. Or, I want to be a teacher now, or I want to do something else. It's just very difficult to get a grasp of this generation in terms of what they are trying to accomplish with the job. And so that's the difficulty of it. So
Is there an instrument that might be available in that, when you're first kind of screening these candidates that would indicate, I know there is in the teaching profession.
Right.
Is it foolproof? No, but is there anything in law enforcement, like an instrument that could tell in terms of a score, candidates with a higher score, more of a chance that they would be successful?
Without going into a great detail, we do 2 separate interviews.
Right.
Polygraph, background. They spend a full 8-hour day with a police psychologist, and that would be when they're doing the assessments of whether or not they're suited for the law enforcement profession. And our firm in Overland Park does most of the metropolitan area in terms of that. Really, really good at telling me, Chief, this person is a solid no, don't hire them, or this person is or this person is good. So everything that we can think of, we're trying, and it is what it is. We're struggling, but it's everywhere in the United States. It's just everywhere in the United States in terms of the profession of law enforcement. Okay. So let's get into a little bit of the numbers. So if you would look on the left-hand column right there, the big purple one that says 29%. So in terms of that, less than 29% of our patrol force has less than 2 years of experience. That worries me a little bit. Experience is important, being able to handle and deal with calls. The one that's 27% is 3 to 5 years. And so full half of our force is less than 5 years. We've got a really, really good young core group of people that are hanging in there with us and getting better every day. But that's a reflection of where we are. I think most police departments look like that. So that's probably something that I pay attention to a lot. Our budget numbers, we do a lot of.
Go back to that pie chart real quick, again, on the percentages.
Percentage, I'm sorry.
For example, 2% is 2630, I don't know if that's you or someone else. Is that what it says, 2%?
Yes.
That means one person, because you're basically, that's just one person. So this is based on a university about 50 off current.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and the big numbers are the reflective of the uniformed officers that are out on the road.
Right.
Okay. So there's a police budget. We do a lot of community engagement, our summer camps. I mean, we spend a lot of time trying to do that, every conceivable effort we can, which is helpful to us.
Did you ever hear back from any of those kids who,
Oh yeah, they recognize me at Walmart or somewhere. Hi, Chief, I was at the camp, or they're wearing them shirts. The shirt is like gold. It's the most popular thing in the world. I'll see them all the time still. So we have a lot of success with
Are you
that.
planning to do it again?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. In fact, we have our first meeting coming up here in a couple of weeks, I think, planning. Calls for service. So this is indications on the top right-hand side. That number stays about the same, somewhere 23,000 times. That is someone calling us saying we need the police for something. A crime, a traffic accident, whatever, we need the police. And so that's about 66 times a day in terms of our call load. Okay. Reports, 6,500. That's how many police reports we take every year. Part 1 and 2, Part 2 crimes. I'm going to skip this one. This is indicative of, but this is a little harder to understand. I'm going to break those down individually. We spend a ton of time breaking down the city. The map on the left is reflective of the city of Leavenworth. You will see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are our whole districts. Contained within those districts are individual smaller zones. All kinds of data that we collect, we can break down by block, by neighborhood, by community to help us deploy assets in the right locations. And then this is persons crimes, all of the data in terms of the persons crimes that are reflected by the area on the right-hand side. That is criminal activity persons crimes over the last 8 years, somewhere between about 600 and 800 person crimes a year. Most of that is domestic violence related. Okay? Most of that's domestic violence related.
Which would be under assaults, right?
Right, assault.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Same thing with property crimes. We're doing property crimes the same way, by region, area, district, that sort of thing. And there it is right there again. That is mostly indicative of burglary and theft, stuff like that takes place. Part 1 crimes, on the left-hand side, this is established by the FBI Crime Index, and this is what everybody in the United States agrees to, is a Part 1 crime. Those there, murder, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, theft, and auto theft. Last year in the city of Leavenworth, those were down by 4.1%. That's a very positive number. That's the big ones that we deal with most consistently. That's a very positive. I'm very happy about that.
What, in your opinion, the meteoric rise from 2011 through 2017, is that because of better reporting, or were there more crimes, or a combination of the two?
For a while, it was sort of the national trend, sort of crime was going up, and then it started to go back down, so ours was a little bit of an outlier. We were going up. And it's domestic violence, it just steady rose for a while. Domestic violence is just pervasive, and that's probably reflective of what those numbers mostly represent. Okay. Clearances, and this is in terms of we identify who's responsible for one of those crimes and hold them to account, so about 55% of the time. We're identifying who's responsible for a crime in that category of Part 1. The hardest one to do is a burglary or a theft, right? That's a hard crime to solve. We probably know who it is, but proving it's a little bit more difficult. Part 2 crimes, that bumped up just a tiny, tiny bit, but essentially statistically those kind of stay about the same.
Do you have a definition of Part 2 crimes?
Everything else.
Everything
else that's not included in those 7. That's literally what it says, is everything else. And so our clearance rates for that are about 85%. That's a little higher because that would be, we went to a bar fight and we actually saw you commit a crime, we arrested you, so we know who it is. It's not like there's any secret about that. Or we caught somebody with marijuana and cited them or something like that. That's much easier. We know who it is that did it. Right? Okay. Total?
I got a question.
Sure.
Are bar fights still a major problem within the city?
No.
That's okay.
Right, no, not something that's.
Right, that's happening
Let me
every
use
day.
a different example.
That's good.
Like drunk in the street, maybe.
Right, okay.
Something like that, right?
Good.
All told, our clearance rate is just about 70%. So 7 out of 10 times when a crime is committed, we are identifying who that is and holding them accountable to that in terms of whether or not they're, prosecuted and the like. So probably slightly above the national average in terms of that. Pretty happy with that number. Okay. Mental health, there it is. That's the big one. 218 last year, highest we've had in since 2012. It's probably higher than that going back. We just are focusing on about the last 8 years.
Well, and we've had a big push on suicide.
Right, everybody is focused on that. Our task force we've been working on.
Task force, right.
Yeah, everybody's really focused on that. That is a function of funding at the state level. We really have got to have that back in place to help us with that, because that's, difficult to solve,
So 218 suicide calls, is that what that number is?
Right.
How
If people
many,
are calling,
how
then maybe
many
they're preventing
were
it, you know?
suicides were there, do you know?
I'll have to look that one up. That we're
I can
actually-
send that, I mean, I have that working as
What
part
was
of.
running
the
about
county.
10, this
14,
is
it
this
was
city.
running 14
This
last
is the
year. I
city.
don't know what it was this year.
You talking city or county?
County.
Okay, but these are
It's
just
county.
city.
This is the city of
And
Leavenworth.
these, the 218, so you talk many of them off the ledge, so
The
so to
large
speak.
majority of them we
Yeah,
do,
so to
right?
speak,
But,
yeah.
I can look up actually.
I have the information, I can send.
For the city, as opposed to the county.
No, I don't have it for the city, I have it
I'm
for the
asking
county.
the city, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But would the city be separate from the county, or is the city,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be part of the county numbers?
Would be part of the county numbers, but it'd be the aggregate, which wouldn't tell you what the city was.
Right. But it is part of the county numbers that,
I don't know who you got your numbers from.
That's
I got it from Sheriff Dedeke.
Yeah.
That's where I got
Yeah,
that.
it's from the sheriff's
I
office.
don't think
They keep their own, so I'm
Okay,
betting,
Yeah.
well, that's good
betting
to
that
know.
ours is different.
Okay.
So, I'll get that to you.
I don't have that.
In any event, this is the big one that we spend tremendous amounts of time and resources and efforts on. It's 3 or 4 officers, sometimes an hour at a time. Very dangerous to get under control, no infrastructure behind that, so we were sitting at the hospital for a lot of time. Really tough to deal with, but spend a lot of our training dollars on teaching officers how to deal with all kinds of mental health issues in terms of response and crisis and all that. Spend a lot of our time on this one. Our detective division, there's some numbers on that. Arrests, big number here. So about 2,200 times a year, we're arresting people for various crimes. Again, domestic violence is a mandatory arrest, so a big bulk of those 2,000 adult arrests are probably domestic violence, right, that we had to arrest on. Other things, DUI, stuff like that. Right? And 174 kids went to JDC. We break our arrests down just like we do everything else by area. Don't get hung up on area 2. That's where the police department is. So very often someone might turn themselves in on a warrant, or they're in jail for something else and we serve a warrant. So that number's higher, but that's reflected because that's where the jail is. There's our domestic cases we went down last year. That's a really positive step. I'm happy about that. We break this stuff down by area, by age, gender, race, every conceivable way. We try and study that to see if there's any helpful way to address that. Narcotics enforcement, still doing an awful lot of, still doing some work on narcotics. You saw the little U there. 2012, we had the fully functioning narcotics unit out and about, working, doing all that. Staffing issues caused us to cut that, and so you saw the numbers kind of decline. Those numbers, the 139, 146, 113 is patrol officers out encountering somebody on something and making a drug arrest. Now you see the numbers start to creep back up because we've had the drug officers back reinstated. Let me share with you some information about a broader case we've had ongoing for a little while with our federal partners and local partners with the Sheriff's Department. We've seen 11 people indicted in the last year on very serious cases, some of those folks from Leavenworth. We've received all kinds of drug cases, methamphetamine, cocaine, marijuana, fentanyl, all of the stuff that you might hear about and see about on the news, we're doing that here locally. And so we've had some very good success in terms of targeting those mid-level folks that are causing us the trouble. And so we continue to work very hard in that regard.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Is there an issue with K2 in the city of Leavenworth?
Depends on what you mean by issue. Occasionally, we come across somebody that's smoking K2. It's not as prevalent probably as it was 5 years ago, but regular, good old-fashioned marijuana is pretty cheap and easier to get and much more effective and quite honestly less dangerous. K2 for a while was very dangerous. It had some mixtures of stuff in it that really caused a lot of trouble, so it's less. Now, our partners at the CCA and the prisons struggle with that. Somehow it gets in there, and so that is an issue for those
Hey,
folks.
Chief, I do have a question. You have reestablished a narcotics unit within the police department?
Yes, sir.
And that was in beginning of 2018 or?
18 months, I think 18 months or something.
Okay. And, one of the things on that chart up there is the warrants served really went down. And 2018, positive from the standpoint of, it's starting, that curve is starting to go back up the incline. But just explain warrants, can come from the city, can come from the county, you know, had a warrant, what do you
This
mean?
this is all us, right here.
Okay.
Right? All this data is us. So for example, in 2011, we had active drug unit working. They were working confidential informants, they were working undercover operations, they were doing surveillance, they were doing all that. That provides us data and evidence to get a search warrant, and then the SWAT team comes and visits the house. Absent that, we're really responsive, we're reactive, or catching somebody on a traffic stop with meth or something like that. Now, you have to have people dedicated to that, to spend the time working those cases, and it takes a while, and it gets a little frustrating for people, in order to see the warrants go back up. And then,
Which you had three, you issued three this year, right?
Yeah.
Or the judicial system issued three.
That's us, yeah.
Okay.
The judge issued three
Right.
warrants, and we did,
Right.
right? And so, that in combination with the big federal stuff that we've, had some success on, that is all the Leavenworth Police Department, but we've been working in concert with some other agencies.
Would you expect that number to go up
Oh, yeah.
next year? Or this year, I'm sorry, this year?
Yeah, I expect the number to go up. I am very, very selective about when we deploy the SWAT team, because that's a very high-level use of force, and we can do a warrant with regular police officers and all that. The SWAT team is a very high level, and I'm very conservative in my approach about that, because if we get tangled up, it really can be problematic. So we, 10 or 15 times a year, hopefully, something like that. No particular number. You'll see at the bottom, the seizures are down. That's drugs and money and stuff from you see nationally a lot of discussion about that and debate about that, locally in the state. The laws are getting much more restrictive about that. I just don't see that being as valuable as a tool as it has been in the past, where we would be able to use proceeds from drug cases to buy police equipment and stuff like that. We still have a little bit, but it's really, really kind of going down a little bit. Traffic accidents, just about 600 a year, 113 injuries, some alcohol-related stuff. Traffic citations, that's, less officers equate to less tickets, unfortunately.
I see an awful lot of people running red lights.
Right.
And it's really scary downtown when I'm walking to the post office.
Right. We've been able to reinstitute one person in the traffic unit who spends some time during the day going out and hammering away at violations. There's plenty of problems, and we'll hopefully continue to work on that.
Thank you.
Traffic citations, we break all of our data down by race and age and gender and all that stuff, in case folks have questions about that.
And that would include speeding, the
Citations, yes.
citations?
Yes, sir. Okay. Traffic accident locations, on the left, the two, column 13 is Walmart.
Yeah.
It is a tough place out there. Folks try, for whatever reason, to get out onto Eisenhower or have problems at the light there, and so that's where we spend some time with traffic accidents. So a total of 26 last year, a couple times a month, we were out by Walmart. It is in fact.
Is it mostly on the Eisenhower side, or is it on 10th Avenue?
It's on somebody trying to pull out from the south entrance of Walmart onto Eisenhower is most of them.
Because I know, I came out of Walmart today and I was
going
turning
to
north
Circle
on 10th
K.
Avenue, and there is a little bit of a blind spot at the bottom of that hill. You start to go out and it's blind, and all of a sudden they pop.
But so, and then, we rank the intersections in terms of how many, but Walmart creates a lot of attention. EUI stuff, we still do that. The seatbelts and all that, we do a little bit of that. This is behavior at the police department, which is important. This is folks coming down and unsatisfied with our behavior. So if you look on the far right-hand side, we had 9 times where we initiated what we call a professional standards complaint. This is evaluating behavior. 5 times were from inside the police department. We took it upon ourselves to take corrective action. 4 times from the outside. You will note on the left-hand column on the 7 to 2, 7 times I instituted corrective behavior on police officers who needed to think about what they were doing and get better at their job. A couple of times they were exonerated from a complaint. So we are doing what we can to make sure we're behaving ourselves out there. Okay. So on the left is bias-based policing. This is racial profiling complaints. Last year we didn't have any. For previous couple of years we had 2 or 3 at a time where someone would come down and say that you took action based on my race. On the right-hand side is use of force. So of the 2,200 times we arrested somebody, last year we went up a little bit, 183 times we used force. But let me talk about that, what I mean by that. This is the kinds of force that we used. We tasered 3 people of the 2,200. Most of the time, there was a little bit of a wrestling match, 106 times, which is about normal. It's where someone's not thrilled about going to jail, so we have to work that out, right? And then 75 times we had to display our weapon. Anytime the officers are displaying their weapon for any reason, they have to tell me about that and why. So we evaluate that and keep track of that in terms of our behavior and making sure that we're doing the right thing on that. And then we break that down, use of force by race and gender and all that stuff, in case folks have questions about any of that. Our bomb unit goes out about once a month. Last year they found 8 explosive devices. Those are all kinds of things from hand grenades to enhanced fireworks to homemade pipe bombs. And so they spend quite a bit of time. Also keep in mind that we cover a region where, for example, Leavenworth County or the Lansing or something like that needs our assistance, will come, because we are supported primarily by the FBI and fall under there, so we cover a region. They go down a couple times and provide bomb coverage at a KU basketball game or something like that, and they fail to invite me, and they're in trouble about that. It's ridiculous. I could carry the stuff, the bomb suit, something like that. And then we keep some, 2,750 fire calls last year. We processed a little information for them about that. I don't know what that is. You'll have to talk to Chief Birch about that, but we keep it. So,
You know, they call 911,
we dispatch the fire.
Okay, this is what that is.
Yeah, they go
I
out.
call and say, my house on fire.
Right.
Yeah, that's what that number is. Okay.
EMS,
Yeah.
they do EMS and fire
Right,
calls.
right.
I bet you most of that's EMS stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Animal control. There's 3 or 4 datas here, but here's the big 2 numbers. We handled 1,174 animals last year in the animal control facility. And
I like how you added the cute pictures.
Yeah, I know, that's so significant.
And we euthanized 17 of those animals, so that is about 1.5%, which about is as good as it's get. Most of those are court ordered, or the animal was really, really sick or injured, and we had, it was a decision that way. That's a pretty good number. I'm pretty happy about that. And then there's the cat and dog.
How many did you adopt out? I saw another one.
Go back up.
Yeah.
We adopted 339.
Yeah, good.
Transferred means rescued somewhere, like a rescue shelter or
Yeah.
something like that. 200. So the largest majority. The other ones were returned to their owner. They escaped, they're running
Yeah.
around causing trouble, and so we gave back to their owner.
But you have good relationship with some of the other, like humane societies, right, as far as the,
We have a
The
professional
animals.
working relationship with that group.
okay.
All right, and then 66 dog bite cases last year, which is a little bit or mostly dog bites, a few cat cases, mostly that's dog bite cases. So we take some pretty solid enforcement action on that. We do not tolerate that much, and then some more animal stuff. So that's essentially encapsulating the police report for 2018. We will put this on the police department's website in the next day or two. The public can view that we do that pretty consistently, and so if you have questions about something you saw tonight, not answer those, or anything else, again, we have a bunch of data that we collect. And I mean, it takes us a few minutes when we can get to it. Any questions you might have, and I'll get that to you.
Okay, yeah.
Good report.
I have one question.
Okay.
Salaries, I mean, is that one of the reasons that sometimes you lose the officers, after 2, 3, or 4 years from other cities or
It
municipalities?
has not been a bigger number than it used to be. So here's essentially how it has been breaking down. We have someone that washes out.
Right.
That's about 25% of the time, where we hire them and they just can't do it. We have leaving for a private sector job. That's another 25%. They go do something entirely different. Or retirements, which is about 25%. We've been averaging about 2 or 3 retirements a year for the last 5 or 6 years. And then we lose people to other law enforcement agencies. Sometimes it's about money, sometimes it's they think the grass is greener. We've had one officer leave and decide they didn't like it, they came back. And so that's essentially how it breaks down statistically, which is my experience with everybody else in the law enforcement profession. The same kinds of things are happening to them, they're happening to us.
I noticed on the new employee you were gone last week, officer came from KCPD, KCMO PD.
Right.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Yeah, so you have that.
They come here and go to a bigger place, or they don't like that, they come,
Yeah.
it's just, very hard to get a grip on putting tangible, I can identify what it is and then take action. It's just too hard now to do that, I think.
Let me hit on compensation real quick. So the city commission funded and both the study and then the implementation of a compensation and classification study. The message I got from Pat wasn't necessarily the starting salary. It was keeping that 3 to 5 year officer, realizing that this is where they want to make their career. So the compensation and classification study looked at where you are, and we phased that in over 5 years for these officers, but we also we wanted to make sure we took care of the officers that we have, so we phased in the increase to the starting salary over the same time period, so they would move with the starting salary.
Makes sense.
We also implemented, just a couple of years ago, the step plan, where after a certain number of years, hitting criteria, very specific criteria that you're included, specialty pay, increased training opportunities, everything we can to keep the ones that we put through the police academy, through the testing. And so but that was all rolled out to them in December. And I think they were really happy with how that turned out. And so we really we want to make sure that compensation, that dollars are not what's keeping us from being competitive in the police
And
department.
it had been for a lot of years.
I think it had.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, good report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Any questions among the commissioners? Commissioner Ballard?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
You good? Commissioner Dedeky? Commissioner Preisinger?
Just want to congratulate Commissioner Bowder and the other members of the St. Patrick's Day Parade Committee. Had a good job they did. And,
Thank you.
a great
It was
parade.
fun.
And, you know, people always enjoy it. And
Beautiful day.
Leavenworth puts on good parades. The St.
We had-
Patrick's Day and Veterans Day Parade, we do
We
very
had
good at.
the help of the city, the police department, and
Yeah.
everything, that you guys do to help us get started down there, and it's a lot of fun. Port Leavenworth participate.
Yeah,
It was
good day.
great, great day.
I just like, another really fine event occurring this weekend is the First City Film Festival.
Yeah.
And the festival is in historic downtown. Our historic downtown includes 4 days, 21 through 24 March, of film screenings, panels, and VIP events for people in town, but also people come from all over to come to this particular festival, which I think is a real good thing for obviously those people, but also for the city. And schedule and tickets available via the festival's website at firstcityfilmfest.com. And there's also going to be, they didn't mention it tonight, all the downtown people, but there's going to be an open house in many of the downtown Leavenworth businesses during Saturday. So hopefully they'll get some customers from, outside the city in addition to our citizens. And the other thing is, I really like that, I've seen it on Facebook and Twitter, the city employees and the leadership in terms of taking care of the flood management and sandbags and everything else going on with dealing with that situation. It's been very impressive, and I just pass along my kudos for their work, so.
Yeah, I just want to briefly, I know it's getting late, potholes. So we were in contact with Leavenworth Asphalt Materials today. We believe that their plant will start generating what's called hot mix or hot asphalt on April 1st. We realize that past today where there was some rain, there's some good weather the rest of this week and next week. So we're purchasing some hot mix asphalt from another plant. And so we'll have 2, potentially 3 crews out starting tomorrow. We're done with flood stuff for now, knock on wood. And we will be patching potholes hot potholes with the hot mix. Please call the service center if you have potholes to report. We know they're out there. We'll be on those and working through those. And then just real quick, I know we talked about the 3 Mile Creek cleanup grant. We put that out and we were surprised, we got really good response. We got about 8 groups. First time we talked to them about what's really required. And so, but we still right now, just, a couple days into it, have 4 strong ones. We'll probably not be able to do it in April because of the 3 Mile Creek flood. It's got to dry out, and then the Parks Department's got to get in there and scrape and power wash the trail. So probably May, but I think we'll have the entire year covered here soon.
That's
so
wonderful.
I think that's going to be a
Great idea.
great project.
Good.
Yeah.
Some groups from the high school reached out, so that was really good, and some faith-based groups too. So
Great.
I'm excited about that.
Well, no other questions? questions or comments? Meeting's adjourned.
Boy. That was a good one.